Hello and welcome to FCSI's President's Panel, a roundtable featuring a selection of FCSI worldwide presidents from the past decade who will today debate the current state of the industry and where it must go next. My name is Michael Jones from FCSI's Foodservice Consultant magazine. I'll be moderating what is set to be an insightful discussion about a sector that has experienced much change, not just in the past decade, but also quite intensely in the past couple of years, but also now, thankfully, some stability too. Very much looking forward to welcoming our panel, some of the world's most experienced and decorated food service consultants to this inaugural event in what we plan to become a regular series. We're focusing on 10 years of FCSI Worldwide Presidents because 2023 will see us celebrate 10 years of the magazine, so it seemed a good staging post to reflect upon, but primarily to look forward as well. Before we introduce our panel, I'd like to extend our thanks on behalf of FCSI to today's sponsors, Salvajor, Vulcan and Vollrath for their support in making today's event possible. As well as a video of the highlights from today's event, which you're watching now, we'll also be writing up the findings into an FCSI white paper, which will capture the key learning, advice and experience from our esteemed panel. So please keep an eye on the website fcsi.org for when that is published. Otherwise, let's get going and meet our panel. Can I ask all of you to introduce yourselves and tell us a little bit about your area of expertise in consulting, as well as telling our viewers when you served as president of FCSI Worldwide. Let's start with the current worldwide president, Mario.
Thank you, Mike. Good evening, everyone. It's good evening from here, Perth in Western Australia. My name is Mario Sequeira. I operate a firm called Hospitality Total Services. I am the current president of FCSI. I've had the honor of doing it for a year. Last week, the board unanimously voted me for another year. I was very honored and humbled to continue the good work that we've started this year. My area of expertise is I've been fortunate to work in both front and back of house throughout my career before I got into consulting, and also got a chance to do some further postgraduate studies. So that gave me a good grounding to get into design and management consulting. And I would say my most recent expertise is in cultural awareness, in dealing with the worldwide board and the various cultures from Europe and Americas and Asia Pacific, and actually galvanizing all together to take our society forward. And I just want to share that last week at the end of our board meeting, one of the senior administrators who's not very easy with his compliments actually said that it was the best board meeting he sat on for the last 12 years. So I think we're doing okay and we're taking the society forward. So that's me. Thank you.
Well, indeed. Thank you, Mario. And Bill, please.
Bill Taunton here from Santiago, Chile. I'm sorry about the back. It's not a decal. I'm in a job site right now. And I was the worldwide president in between 2015 and 2017. My area of expertise is food facilities. Basically, we do all kinds of stuff, and we work all over Latin America. I would say the last couple of years, we have had a very shrinking economy in Latin America, which is the territory that I cover. But it's starting to recover a little bit. And we work, as I said, all over Latin America.
Thank you very much. And Jim, please.
I am Jim Petersen. The name of my company is CII Foodservice Design. I work by myself. I started in 1974 and was a member of FFCS before that became merged and morphed into FCSI. Most of the work I do are public sector projects. I do a lot of K through 12 schools, community, healthcare, correctional facilities, and so on. I was the worldwide president briefly, relatively briefly at the end of 2015, where we did have a little bit of stuff going on that we've thankfully recovered from, but it was my pleasure to be able to serve then. I had also been on the board in the 80s briefly, and I'm currently serving with the FCSI Educational Foundation.
Fantastic. Thank you for joining us, Jim. And Ed, please.
I was president of FCSI Worldwide in 2013. That was a major year of change for FCSI. We basically changed our entire business model during that time, rewrote our bylaws, reconfigured our board of directors. And I served only a one-year term in hopes that we could realign our divisions so that our election processes would be in unison from one year to the next. So it was a short-term presidential relationship for me, but it was a challenging year. We had a great board. We had people with good, good intentions to bring the society forward and kind of find our way in a new type of world where things were different than they had been for the previous 40 or 45 years. So that was a pleasure. I am a designer. I'm also a management advisory consultant. I owned and operated MVP Services Group, which was my firm with my son, Eric, who's now on the worldwide board with Mario and the TAD division. He's chair of the TAD division. So during that 20 plus years that Eric and I ran MVP, we were a small company, very similar to Jim and Bill. In 2017, we merged with Clevenger Associates out of Seattle, and we've had a great relationship, a very dynamic firm. We're very happy to be together and working together. Right now, I'm partially retired, semi-retired, if you want to call it that. I've basically turned over design responsibilities to Eric and the rest of the team. And now I focus strictly on management advisory services for the company. And we'll be doing that for a period of time.
Thank you very much, Ed. Now, before we get to the subject of the future of food service and what maybe 2023 looks like, let's take a quick look back at 2022. So if 2020 was the year of COVID and severe challenge and also the great pivot, if 2021 was mainly a year of reset and recovery for many countries, what was 2022 the year for you guys? How would you sum up that year for the industry? Ed, let's stick with you, please.
2022 was interesting in that during COVID, our company really did not suffer a great deal financially. Most of our projects went through to conclusion. We were pretty much business as usual, with the exception that we were all, forced to maintain distance in our relationships. When we entered 22, it was an uncomfortable year, but yet somewhat of a return to normalcy. We started to see areas and pockets of the world that started opening up. We had an effective vaccine out there that was protecting people. We were slowly bringing people back into our office and going out to on-site meetings and things of that nature. So I would say that it was more of a year of somewhat of a return to normalcy, but with significant challenges. And I'm sure that the other guys here on the panel this morning are going to bring up some of the challenges that they experienced. So I'll just leave it at that. So I'd say a return to normalcy with some major challenges.
Great stuff. Thank you, Ed. Jim, what's your impression of the year just gone by?
Like Ed, we didn't slow down during 20 and 21. What we did find, and we stayed busy, in 22, we've just become actually uncomfortably busy. And a lot of that is because there are so many projects that sort of held up during 20 and 21 that have now started. So I'm involved in more projects already this year than I have been in any other year. Just because people are feeling more like they can go ahead with projects. The biggest issue that I've seen, and we may talk about this later on, that has been real tough for me, particularly because we work a lot with schools where they have very hard deadlines, is the supply chain issues that have resulted from all the issues from the manufacturers down to their suppliers and the ones downstream from there. So we've had a number of schools that have had to open without all the equipment that they were intended to have. And that seems to be lightening up a little bit, but I think we've still got some time to go before it returns to normal, if it ever does.
Yeah, it's going to take a while. Thank you, Jim. Bill, you're clearly on a project on site at the moment. How's 2022 been for you in your project work?
21 was pretty tough in Latin America because we have basically the whole year in 21 was a lockdown. So 22, it started to, by the end of 21, the world started to open again for us in Latin America, but it was lots of insecurity, confusion, fear to invest from the clients, lack of trust. And so everything was strange. But amazingly, we were able to nail some large projects, and it had ended to be one of our best years ever. With all the confusion and all the insecurity and the fear to invest, we were able to nail a couple of large mining projects, and that made us as a firm to be a little bit more secure for this year and for the next couple of years, I would say, because we have a big chunk of business right now in the area, and we are starting to touch back again some new clients in Mexico, in Central America, in Peru, in Colombia. So that gives us a very positive view of 2022 and the next year.
Fantastic, thank you, Bill. Mario, do you have a positive view of 2022?
Well, I had a very interesting 2022 because being worldwide president and everything locked down for 2 years, I had a fair bit of travel. So it was very interesting because I was able to go and go through all the 3 divisions to the Americas, Europe, and also Asia Pacific, and attend whether it was a conference, a trade show. And what was interesting was globally, there were 3 things that were sort of top of the list with all 3 divisions. And the 3 were labor shortages, especially in hospitality and food service. The second was increased costs because of the war and other things that were energy prices. And of course, the other thing that Jim touched on was the supply chain issues. But what that actually did was, also what I noticed in all 3 divisions is what I actually did for FCSI and for FCSI consultants in particular, that they all were very, very busy, because that's what we do. We offer solutions. We offer our skills and our knowledge to the end user. And so with these challenges, it was in the quiet time. It was a busy time as well to address these issues. And and of course, in my region, in Australia, New Zealand, this area, in Australia in particular, where I am, there was very few lockdowns. There were some parts of the country that were locked down. So it was almost business as usual. However, with tourism being severely affected, that affected the hotel industry in particular. But then on the other hand, and that was for the tourism international market, but on the other hand, people stayed local. They supported local businesses. So the local restaurants and pubs and those type of businesses were flying. They were very, very busy, and they had their best years as well. You know what I mean? But then again, hampered by labor shortages. So it was a mixed year, but much better than 21, and certainly a level of optimism moving forward, even though there's on the horizon talking about recession and stuff in 23. I think this part of the world is sort of on a pretty good footing.
Mario, we've a lot of you and the colleagues on the panel have already picked up on a number of the challenges that the industry is facing. You mentioned their increased costs. Jim was talking about supply chain issues. We talked about labor there. Can these kind of significant challenges force an industry to sort of recalibrate and to reset for the better? My point being, can we take many positives from what has been obviously a game-changing scenario for food service?
Well, the thing is that, what do they say is that when you have the adversity and whatever, that's when you get, the human instinct kicks in, and we are always looking at things and how we can address it. And as you can see, the things that come to my mind right now is, whether it's automation and robotics, it's, digitalization, use of data in artificial intelligence, all these things have absolutely leapfrogged into our industry, and to address those things. So to me, those are positives, because they are not only helping to address the concerns that we have, but they're also making businesses more efficient. And also the automation is also introducing a level of consistent quality that customers are looking for.
Thanks, Mario. Ed, similar question to you, really. Can a fundamental reset like the one we've just experienced kind of during and after COVID, can it shake things up and make us maybe operate more creatively? Can good things come out of this that will help us in the future?
I've seen a real shift in the way that our clients think now compared to pre-COVID. Pre-COVID, we were pretty much business as normal. The design process was fairly well locked in over the course of time. We knew how to approach our projects from a design side in order to ensure that operations were efficient, they were safe for food safety and life safety, et cetera. What I see now, though, is a shift in not only the way that our clients think, but the way that we think. I think that we've learned as individuals that things can change on a dime. The pandemic hit us so hard, so fast, and it caused everyone, like you had mentioned, to pivot in their operations. And I think that pivoting has really affected the way that our clients now look at their businesses. And they want to be sure to guard themselves against potential future situations similar to the pandemic. So I've seen a major shift in thinking. I know that in my own personal experience, I'm starting to use COVID as a basis point to open up discussions about what if scenarios that we did not really do too much before that. It was always business as usual. COVID made it very much what if something happens, what will we do? So I think customers are embracing technology, as Mario mentioned, artificial intelligence, robotics. Those are all things that are being looked at more carefully now, but it's going to take some time for those things to really play out and have a major effect on our industry, although we're seeing it today already in motion.
Great answer. Thank you, Ed. Bill, what positives, if any, can the industry take from some of the massive seismic changes it's had to endure over the past couple of years?
The way I look at it is that one of the big points I've always tried to make in the projects that we work, especially when you make big food facilities, is that the hygienic part in Latin America was never seen as something really important. And after the pandemic, or during the pandemic, we were all very scared about those viruses coming into your life. As a matter of fact, I was affected by it directly. Yeah. Almost passed away in the middle. But that changes my way of living, for sure, number one. And number two, in the way I'm looking my projects today, I would say I'm a lot more, how can I say this? I'm very, very strong in my position about hygienic and security in the operations. And in many of our clients in Latin America, what we are looking is that they are finally being able to put a lot of attention to that. So they're willing to expend the money on those health and security issues that they weren't really fun about it, because they always consider it's an exaggeration. All these things are exaggerated. And right now, everybody's asking us, hey, are you taking in consideration, COVID or the new pandemics for the future or whatever is coming? So that's a positive thing I see, Mike, from my perspective over here, especially in this last year.
Fantastic stuff. Thank you very much, Bill. Jim, is there any specific innovation or any particular new way of thinking born out of the past couple of years that's fundamentally changed how you approach projects and will do in the future?
It really has, and it's more of a practical kind of thing and I think all of us in regard to going to meetings. I think that's one thing that was the technology was there before COVID. COVID caused being able to have remote meetings to be something very, very important. And I think now that we have seen how that works, we won't have to drive 2 hours to attend a 15-minute meeting anymore. So from a practical perspective, I think that's a great benefit. I don't think it outweighs all the bad stuff that happened. As I said, we'll have to deal with some of the lingering effects of what's going on, labor and supply issues, and some of the other things that I think we'll be talking about later on. We will need to learn to deal with those. And then if something like this were to happen again, at least we've already had some experience in how to deal with it. So the learning curve won't be quite so steep. There'll still be new issues, I'm sure, whenever something like that happens again. But I think there's just been a lot learned that will help us get through if it does happen again.
Thank you very much, Jim. Staying on that subject of the learning curve, let's talk for a moment about why food service consultants as a profession must continue to stay close and learn about new products and innovative new developments that are out there, particularly from equipment manufacturers. Why is innovation the lifeblood of this sector? I don't know who wants to take that question first.
I suppose the thing is that there are, you got to look at all the different forces at play. So what is it? It's the environment. It's the pandemic of, the food safety. It's the labor shortages, all these things that are at play. So the thing is that we have to look at it and see, budgets are shrinking, spaces are shrinking. So all of a sudden now we can't, approach a project or our design or even management consulting the same we did before. We have to be, working very closely with our allied members, and they're doing a fantastic job, I might add. Because there are so many of these forces at play and so many different things, and now they are becoming legislation like ESG legislation, where they have to take into the environment, the social aspects of all your design. And so innovation does help you, whether it's specifying a piece of equipment that is multi-use or low energy, or the gentleman spoke earlier about, reducing the waste, doing more with less, or even achieving less with more, as he was trying to say. It was quite interesting, that's what we need to do. So yeah, absolutely. The innovation is something that is absolutely critical and a cornerstone of all that we do.
Thanks, Mario. Go ahead, Ed.
Well, looking back over the last 15, 20 years, there was a point in time as our industry matured that innovation kind of stopped. And what had happened there, it was during a period of time when manufacturers were, let's put it complacent. They were, squeaking out profits. They were complacent with research and development. And then all of a sudden, in the past 10 or 15 years, the market has driven them to become more creative. And I think that COVID and the pandemic even pushed that farther to the edge of the envelope. I think it's all great. I'm excited about what I've seen over the last 15, 20 years with innovation. We watch these companies bring forward new products every year. They're exciting, they're versatile. They really allow us to do more with less. And for us to be able to take that to our client and say, here, I can develop and deliver a sustainable kitchen design for you, one that's going to last a number of years, extremely versatile. Here's the equipment that I'm proposing you use. And to watch people react to that, it's really quite exciting when you think about it. Fantastic. So this innovation that we're seeing and the new developments that we're seeing rolling out with robotics and some of the, like our sponsor companies are bringing forward some of the new technologies. it's really going to allow us as consultants and as designers to bring forward some pretty powerful stuff for our clients going forward.
Thank you, Ed. Jim, anything to add to that?
I guess I keep on thinking about the supply chain side of things and how we are to deal with that. As I mentioned, we do a lot of schools, and basically we have gotten to a point now where they are pre-ordering items like walk-ins, for instance, that have a very, very long lead time, which starts to create some issues in terms of warranty, for instance, and you have to store it for a while until it's ready. We had in April, we had a meeting in Montreal, and one of the breakout sessions had to do with supply chain issues. And one of the things that one of the speakers said made me feel much more sympathetic towards the dealers, because the dealers are sort of like the example they use is sort of like the gate agent at an airline when there's a weather delay, is that the information they have is only as good as they've been given.
Yeah.
And then they have to take the heat when, you know, the refrigerator company that has, you know, lots and lots of reach-ins on their dock, but they're waiting for a pump or a chip or a tube or something like that from one of their suppliers. And I think that we all have to work together to do the best that we can with that while the manufacturers kind of dig out from underneath. And I think it looks like the situation in China maybe is starting to break a little bit with, which is where I think the whole supply chain issue, I think eventually leads back to China and other countries that shut down significantly. So I'm looking forward to that getting better.
Fantastic. Thank you, Jim. Bill, anything else to add on that at all?
Well, why is this innovation lifeblood of this sector? I remember, Mike, many years ago, you know, when you used to design, you know, kitchens, you use lots of space, and you have one piece of equipment for every single thing you want to do. You have a griddle, you have a grill, you have an oven, you have a fryer, you have all kinds of stuff, and everything was big. And at the end of the day, it's hundreds of square feet of use. And these new technologies, at the end of the day, what they have reduced is all these multi-function type equipment that has allowed us to reduce the sizes of the kitchens and the productivity of the people in a huge manner. When you live in markets that money is not, you know, the biggest asset we have, and you gotta do more with less, is when we started, you know, using that concept of using all this multi-function equipment, that it's expensive, but we were able to help our clients to reduce their investments at the end of the day, reduce the amount of people working in the kitchens, reduce the square footage of these kitchens, and do more products with less equipment.
I'd like to stay on the subject of innovation and look at disruption and as a force for good, I guess. So a question here from our for the panel from our good friends at Vulcan, as one of the sponsors of the event.
Hello, and I'm very glad to be with you today. My name is Dan Montgomery, and I'm the Director of Design and Consultant Services with Vulcan. We're delighted to be able to support this special FCSI roundtable. Our question for you today and for the panel is, why is disruptive technology good for this sector? What is it? How is it taking us forward? And how positively disruptive can food service equipment actually be in terms of its impact?
The disruption, I don't know if it's necessarily disruptive technology, as it is that we've been disruptive in the things that we normally haven't had to worry about. One of the things that I guess I would touch on is what has happened with the labor situation. We complain about it in food service, but it affects all segments in the projects I'm involved with. Every time I go to a school, there are signs saying they're looking for food service workers, bus drivers, custodians, paraprofessionals, substitute teachers. It affects us, but I think what we need to be involved with is how do we help them deal with that aspect and others. But to focus on labor, I've been sort of exploring with my clients beyond the food service issue is, well, how are you going to deal with labor? I mean, do you need to? There's the obvious, better wages, better working conditions, health insurance, and that sort of thing. But I can see where schools, particularly when there have been reductions in enrollment, which is happening in a lot of schools, and from one school to another, even the course of a year, they may have empty classrooms, is maybe they need to start providing daycare for their employees. So I don't know that technology has been disrupted. I think actually technology has been enhanced because we've had to deal with all these issues.
Yeah, that's a really interesting angle. Thank you, Jim. Mario, how do you think disruptive thinking is good for this sector?
Well, the thing is, at the end of the day, we are all in business. Everyone's in business because of the customer. If we've got a client, we've got to satisfy our client. And somebody's out there, whether he's got a restaurant, whether he's got a school, or he's got a hotel, he's got a customer that he's got to look after. Those customer needs are changing. Those customer needs are changing because of climate, because of political reasons. It's different things that it's happening. And as a result of that, we have to then focus on how do we satisfy that end customer. And what is that end customer looking for now? The end customer wants things now. They want it convenient. They want it, at their doorstep. They want, so disruptors, like if you say Uber Eats, or whether you talk about ghost kitchens that are doing in there, that's part of what the customer wants, and that's what they're in there for. So they are positive disruptors to the extent that they're there to actually satisfy the customer's needs. Now, whether they're long-term sustainable or not is another matter, but that's what the disruption's doing, basically. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Ed, have you got anything to add to that at all?
Yes, I do. One thing that I've seen when we talk about disruption is, we all remember reading articles and hearing the news during COVID about how the industry, particularly food service industry, was losing a tremendous number of employees. And as we started to recover, those employees weren't coming back right away.
Yeah.
So what has happened as part of this disruptive environment that we've lived in is that we've lost a great deal of knowledge and skill on behalf of the labor force that was heavily employed in the restaurant and hospitality industry. What I see happening now is that the industry is more accepting of technologies and innovations that are allowing us to do more with less on the employee skill set side of the equation. So, for example, in a recent project that I was doing in the Pacific Northwest, we talked specifically about centralized food production for this particular client, and how we could utilize technology to flatten the training curve.
Yeah.
When it came to cooks that had to be of a higher caliber than a line cook at a fast food restaurant. This was a subject conversation that the client's open to it. They understand it. They need to be able to bring in people with little to no skill and to effectively train them quickly. So I think the disruptor in the workforce, along with the innovation on the side of the manufacturer, is going to really bring and accelerate things a great deal. Personally, I just, for the first time since COVID hit, I actually ate off of a buffet this past week. And it's scary when you start thinking about handling all those utensils that all those other people have utilized. So it's, if I'm afraid of it, I'm sure that the consuming public's afraid of it.
Fantastic. A further question from Vollrath, and big thanks to them for their support.
Hello, FCSI presidents. I'm Brian Hedlund with Vollrath. We're very pleased to be supporting this special roundtable. My question for the panel relates to the pressing labor challenges operators are facing. Is automation the primary answer or just one of the pieces of the puzzle?
I think the training of staff should be the primary answer. I mean, one of the things about the future for me is that even though many things have become simpler, but we need to go back to our people. We need to go back to our roots and start training our people in a better way. I think the food service industry is going to go back to be a business of people, where people is going to be very important finally, because for many years, people wasn't really important. It was like, meat in the grinder. If you don't want to do it, let's go to next and next and next. The way I see it is that today we're going to have to be very, very conscious about who we are hiring and training them and paying them the way it's supposed to be.
Thank you, Bill. Jim, do you concur with that? Do you agree? Do you think we do need to go back to being a business of people, or do you think automation is the way forward?
I agree with Bill. When I think of automation, I kind of wonder about how big a project has to be before they benefit from that. Like huge bakeries. There's already automation available for very, very large quantities of things. With my projects, since they're typically publicly funded, whether it's automation or other types of technology, the cost is just not in the cards. They're not huge projects, and the way that they're funded, they can't exceed a given budget. And even if there's a great ROI that can be presented, it's just like, yeah, but they're legally not able to increase the cost using ROI as a justification. So I'm not really convinced that significant automation is really going to improve things. I think by the time usable automation is really affordable and applicable, at least to the project I'm involved with, that it's the big thing now is just getting the people back to work.
Thank you, Jim. Let's focus on sustainability for a moment here. Mario, do you think the pandemic has in any way made us reassess the sort of the fragility, the vulnerability of the systems around us in terms of sustainability? Do you feel that operators, manufacturers, consultants are taking sustainability more seriously now than they were before COVID?
Yeah, but I don't think it's the pandemic that's the factor, the motivating factor. I don't think it's a pandemic. I think it's the climate. I think it's the climate. I think it's the paradigm shift of the people having faced the pandemic and having, realizing the value of life and having, just appreciating what they have, where they took things for granted before. You know what I mean? So that from that point of view, but otherwise, it's a climate and other things that are at play that are, making people think about it. And at the end of the day, it is, as I said, the pandemic's impacted on their lives and how they're looking at things. And now it's not, for some people, it's almost becoming second nature now. You know what I mean? They want to support local. They want to, they're concerned about the carbon footprint, and they're concerned about what they're doing, what they're consuming. They're concerned about, where they eat and what they eat and the healthy diet that they eat. And then they're also concerned about the waste and the waste that's being generated in the world, and use of plastics and other things like that. So I think it is, the pandemic was one factor, but there are, I think that just the climate and the whole way that we're approaching things is there. And also it varies in different parts of the world, depending on which part of the world you are. In some parts of Asia and Middle East and things like that, where there is an energy pricing is not that critical. It's not that important. Or in some cases where we talked about automation earlier, in some places where labor is cheap, automation is not necessarily what they're after. But the way we approach it and we say it is that if it is something that's repetitive in nature, then we would look at automation and then use that same labor and that same thing for more customer focused tasks in the workplace, basically. Yeah.
Great, thank you, Mario. That seems a good place to bring in another question from our sponsors. So this is from Salvajor.
Hello, FCSI presidents. I'm Jim Ottmer with Salvajor. We are thrilled to be supporting this FCSI roundtable, and we wanted to pose to the team a question. With sustainability an increasingly important factor for operators, will 2023 be the year of doing more with less?
We have, as most of us have traveled the world to some degree in our duties as past presidents and as consultants, you know, when you look at the various cultures and you look at the various countries, we're not all on the same playing field. So I very much agree with Mario's thoughts on the fact that in some areas of the world, sustainability isn't considered. Because they have a labor force. There's, you know, they're at a point in their timeline of growth and development where it's not important to them. And then we look at the responsible parties, the larger countries that we've become more mature in our industry, and we value, you know, life, and we value our planet, and we know that we're spewing out harmful things into our environment. And those countries, and there are many of them, of course, but those countries are more in tune with the sustainable effort. So I'm sorry I drifted off there, Mike, a little bit back to what Mario had said.
No, it was a great answer. I guess it's focusing on doing more with less. Do you think kitchens, I mean, Mario talked about kitchen spaces shrinking and things having to be more energy efficient. Do you see that as only going in one sort of upward curve?
Not necessarily. There is a local movement, and we're seeing the local movement playing into the future. If I'm doing a farm-to-table restaurant, or if I have a school district that I want to embrace farm-to-table, or a college environment, farm-to-table in some cases dictates more space for the cleaning and processing of fruits, vegetables, even meat products. And therefore it dictates larger processing facilities. So it really, when we talk to clients about the direction they wish to move, their answers and how they're going to approach these environmental considerations and their mode of operation are going to dictate how big or small that kitchen can be. So what I think we'll see potentially down the road are cooperatives. So for example, we already see it somewhat in the restaurant world, where restaurants join together and cooperatively source product through farm. And then in that scenario, they could do processing centers that would clean and prepare vegetables and fruits and meat products, protein products, prepare them for the restaurant who has limited space, so that they're not, they're not trying to tackle that beast on their own with a small footprint.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Thank you, Ed. Jim, similar question to you. How do you think climate change and sustainability will influence decision-making in kitchens in the future?
Again, in my experience, sustainability and automation both cost something. And we do get involved with projects where they want the building to be, a certain level of LEED, energy savings, and that sort of thing. But we find that there's not really a huge emphasis on sustainability with the projects that we work on. There is, we do frequently get some local legislative issues. For instance, fats, oils, and greases, and solid wastes. Things seem to have changed quite a bit in the past 5 or 10 years, where the local jurisdictions will not accept a lot of that kind of stuff going into the municipal waste system. So we do have to look at equipment that will take care of that, and it's sort of forced sustainability in that respect. But we're so used to trying to put 10 pounds of kitchen in a 5-pound bag that we're already doing more with less almost all the time.
Good stuff. Thank you, Jim. Mario, do you think plant-based menus are going to continue to dominate as they have done in the last couple of years? Do you think we'll see a decline in meat-based menus? Will it be a steady kind of switch over? Will it be a rapid descent for meat-based menus?
Again, I don't think, Mike, that'll be a common thread across the world. It'll depend on country to country, region to region. For example, in Australia, a place like Australia, where there is a lot of natural resource and there's good quality beef and lamb and pork and chicken and seafood and all of those things, the plant-based thing has creeped in, but it'll take a while before it dominates or has a massive decline in the meat-based thing. But on the other hand, you see other developing countries where, you know, meat is you know, it's a luxury to eat and whatever else, and they can get the plant-based stuff and they can get their thing there. So those ones, they're already into that. But now with those things being more innovative and, you know, different ways that they're presenting themselves and also giving you all your healthy stuff that you need, your protein and carbs and whatever you need through the plant-based stuff. So in some countries, yes, it will. But I think it's another one that will also have its time in the sun. Like, you know, everybody gets into it and gets the healthy thing in there. And then after a year or so, they said, oh, geez, when am I going to have my steak? You know, where's my steak? I'm missing my steak. So I think my philosophy in life is everything in moderation. You know what I mean? Everything in moderation. And I think that's how it will plateau. It will sort of find its level, everything in moderation. And yeah, but I can't see it taking over, though it's making its mark. And what's interesting on what's that's in the meat, in the beverage industry in Australia, the single most growing segment is the no alcohol segment.
Yeah,
you know, which is quite interesting. And a similar vein of, you know, like talking about plant-based versus meat or whatever it is, and the no alcohol. So it is just interesting. But again, I can't see that as being dominating a period of time. Everyone wants to try it, feel good, and then you know, water will find its level.
Thanks, Mario. Bill, how are consumer dietary changes going to affect equipment, kitchens, and how you guys are designing them? What do you think are the biggest impacts going to be there?
That's really hard to understand, because most of the younger people, at least in Chile, they're looking for these vegan foods and all these plant-based foods. But the older people and the poorer people in Latin America are more into the, I would say, protein-based meats and, you know, chicken, beef, whatever. So I think it will change a bit, but I don't think it's going to be a big change for what we're doing. Maybe in some countries we'll do more. Maybe I would say in the big cities it might change, but in the rural areas, I don't know if that's the way you say it, but you know, in the countryside areas, I don't see lots of people eating plant-based. I mean, people in the countryside, they want to eat their chicken and their beef, and I'm with them, because I have lots of friends that are going into the plant-based stuff, and I've tried almost everything they eat, and it's not the same.
Staying on the subject of, I guess, sustainability. So with commercial kitchens continue to become more electrified, and certainly we've seen that sweeping across from the West Coast towards the East Coast of the US and North America. Do you think that will be the main driver for how kitchens are going to become more energy efficient, where it's perhaps more legislated and regulated, or do operators continue to need to do more to lower their own energy footprint and therefore costs? Ed, have you got an answer on that?
Energy is a big consideration, and the cost of energy is going to continue to be paramount. I think what we're seeing in the electrification side of things is that it's a driving force, because we now have access to wind energy, solar energy. You know, that's being pushed forward. We can see that with electrical vehicles now being front and center in much of the marketing. And I think that, you know, we've always had the ability to produce electricity with nuclear, with water. And now we're discovering even more sources available. So yes, I do think that's going to play a role. You know, it's quite interesting. I visited Moscow, Russia years ago on a project, spent a week there with Eric, and they have no natural gas in Moscow feeding commercial food service because they are afraid of the potential for explosion. They're actually today where we probably would like to be going forward. But I think it's got to be tempered. If you're a chef and you're used to working on gas-fired equipment, it is a transition to move from a gas-fired range to a electric range. There's a transition from wood burning to natural gas to electric. So I think that there will always be a portion of the industry that'll be chef-driven, culinary-driven, that will want to stay with some of our natural resources if they're available. But I do think that the electric kitchen is a thing of the future. We're already looking at that from the design side. How soon that's going to impact our firm, we're seeing it to some degree already in larger cities, especially the West Coast, as you mentioned. I think it'll continue to move across the states as time goes on.
Great stuff. Thank you, Ed. Mario, same question to you, please.
Well, the thing is that there are some parts of the world, you know, in the States and in America and in Australia as well, it's creeping in. It's you don't have a choice anymore. They're saying if you design a new kitchen, you just can't have gas in it. You know, it's got to be electric. And the thing is that we have a responsibility as food service consultants to actually educate the people about the benefits. You know, I mean, they cooked with gas, and then they said, you know, nothing like cooking with gas. But once you give them the benefits, when you say electric, the thing is that the modern electric with them, which is the induction, which has been around for years anyway. Mm-hmm. However, and you know, the benefits of you cooking the induction with, you know, the energy savings, the ambience in the kitchen, you're not creating the heat, the smell, the emissions that you're getting from the gas, that you're just breathing in the carbon monoxide and dioxide that's coming out from the gas and whatever. So when you espouse all those you know, those benefits that you get from induction and that type of cooking, then it helps that transition, you know, into electrification. And so it's not just it's about, and that's the other thing, is that now businesses, countries are being forced to meet emission targets, carbon emission targets. So these are all part of, you know, and this is now part of legislation, and we're on that journey. And yes, it is on an upward trend, and it's our role as food service consultants to take them on the journey and explain the benefits of you know, with induction and electrification. Yeah.
Great answer. Thank you, Mario. A final question from me to all of you, please. I'm hoping you can all answer this one. What do you think will be the biggest trends to impact the food service and hospitality sector for the rest of this decade? What will really change the game for operators, customers and consultants alike? Jim, can we start with you first, please?
I think in the immediate future, it would go back to some of the acute demands that we're dealing with now in regard to supply chain and staffing and that sort of thing. I think that will even itself out within, you know, 2, 3, 4 years. So I don't think that is going to be a long-term issue. Sustainability, on the other hand, I think is going to make a big difference. Going back to the previous question, where I live, we have lots of natural gas available. It's clean burning. Chefs prefer it for cooking, and cooking is pretty much, at least in my experience, the only place where gas is routinely used anymore. I live about a mile away from the largest solar field east of the Mississippi, not too far where we have lots of wind turbine fields. So that's coming along. But over time, we're either going to run out of or be legislated out of the opportunity to use gas. So even though I'm a supporter of using gas where it's available, I think we need to recognize that it's going to go towards electric. And we need to do whatever we can to be involved in making that an easy and as inexpensive as possible transition.
Great stuff. Thank you, Jim. Bill, same question to you too, please. What do you think the biggest changes that will be to impact the sector?
I would say energy and water consumption. We're working, I'm hearing what everybody is saying, and in my case, I would say the last 10 to 12 years, over 90% of what we do is electric operated. We haven't been using gas for a long time because equipment is more expensive, installations are more complex in this part of the world because of security issues. So we're very, very used to energy, to electric energy. And the big change for us now is water consumption, because we have been living a drought in South America for the last, and I think Australia and New Zealand should be the same, for the last 12 years. There's almost no rains. We are in the middle of a very complex situation with water consumption and energy use. I would say in the next 10 years in Chile, almost everything is going to be electric.
Great, thank you, Bill. Ed, same question to you. What do you think broadly will be the biggest trends to impact on this sector in the next decade?
I definitely think all the issues around natural resources and utilization of those resources will stay paramount. I think on the other side, when we look at the customer-driven elements, I think we've all learned some real important lessons from COVID to be able to embrace all the different ways that we can serve a customer. So, we see more outdoor dining, we see, delivery as being a big element. And some of those things naturally have trimmed back some since we've emerged out of COVID and we've become more able to travel and to enjoy what life has to offer outside with other people. I still think that demand for those conveniences will be a driver in our industry for the future and for a long period of time. So I think that operators need to be keenly aware of that when they look at conceptualization and ideation of their facilities. How can we best serve the needs of the client and be able to touch the various differences that people have in the way that they look at dining out and the hospitality industry. That will be a major point of discussion as we go forward with design, is what does the client want to do? How are they going to reach their client?
Great stuff. Thank you, Ed. Mario, same question to you as well, please.
I think what the gentleman just said is I agree with all of those ones, but I think one other one that I believe will have a big focus in the next 10 years is digital technology, the use of digital technology. So the thing is that we're already looking at our kitchens and having connected kitchens. We're monitoring, the energy usage. We're monitoring preventative maintenance, with equipment and whatever, the digital technology. And all of that will also be driven by data. The data is being collected. How are we servicing our client? How are we scheduling our staff? How are we scheduling the labor? How are we scheduling production? All of that is all coming from data, all fed into artificial intelligence, and then giving us that information to make decisions in our businesses, in the production, in estimating customers' requirements, their needs. So I think, so digital technology and AI, I think, will be also what the gentleman already mentioned. I think those two will be very, very prominent, and they're already happening. And we're already good to see that our allied members are very much into it. I think all three of the sponsors from today, Vulcan, Vollrath, and Salvajor, are already into that. Spending time and money in R&D that Ed talked about earlier, which was very important, which was previously taken for granted. Each of these large companies have got a massive, focus on that, and they realize that's their lifeblood. That's how they're going to be sustainable themselves as businesses moving forward. So I think that's going to play a big part. And then for us as FCSI consultant, it's excellent. It's part of our journey, and that's even more so that we collaborate with our allies and work with them, and understand and keep at the forefront of all of this, and then we can pass that knowledge and experience to our clients in turn.
Wonderful, thank you. That's a brilliant place to draw this FCSI's President's Panel to a close. So I'd like to thank, obviously, our excellent panel today, Mario, Jim, Ed and Bill, as well as thanking our sponsors, Salvajor, Vollrath and Vulcan, for their support. Otherwise, thank you for watching and stay tuned for further details. Thank you so much.
Thank you
very much.